All right, thank you all for being here. Let's get right into it. Today's explainer serves as an urgent advisory briefing for this board on a critical and, honestly, vastly overlooked vulnerability in our enterprise architecture, and that's geopolitical risk. We naturally tend to think of our digital infrastructure as a neutral utility, right? Like electricity or running water. You flip the switch, it works. But the reality of today's tech landscape is just far more complex. Today, we're really looking at what happens when the operational systems we rely on day in and day out get completely entangled in international policy. Okay, let's dive into this. Because for years, we've essentially operated under the illusion that public clouds are just these neutral, highly scalable technical tools. But what happens when the provider that's hosting your data, your communications, your entire workflow gets a direct order from a foreign government to pull the plug? The absolute core question we have to answer today is this. What happens to our organization when our operational backbone is suddenly completely disabled? And not by a cyber attack or a server going down, but by a geopolitical mandate that is 100% outside of our control? To get a handle on this, here is the structured assessment we're going to follow. First, we'll look at the kill switch reality. Second, extraterritorial laws and sanctions. Third, assessing our cloud dependency. Fourth, the data localization myth. And finally, strategic mitigation and exit. Starting right off with Section 1, the kill switch reality. This isn't just theory, this has already happened. Take Nayara Energy, for example. They're a major Indian oil refining company partly owned by Russia's Rosneft. Well, when the EU and others imposed sanctions after the invasion of Ukraine, Nayara fell under that scope. Microsoft, being a US-based company, responded by completely cutting off Nayara's access to Teams and Outlook. Period. Just gone. We saw a very similar thing happen with the International Criminal Court, or ICC. Officials there suddenly faced disconnected Microsoft emails after the US government authorized sanctions against them. In both of these cases, business just instantly ground to a halt. And it wasn't a technical glitch. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't a technical issue at all. It was a conscious, remote policy enforcement. To really anchor what this abstract risk feels like on the ground, listen to how Nicolas Guillot, a French judge at the International Criminal Court who was sanctioned, described it. He said the sudden loss of digital services, travel bookings, and banking access was literally like, quote, being sent back to the 1990s. And frankly, that's without the dial-up modems and neon windbreakers to make it fun, right? Just try to imagine the tangible impact on our own corporate operations if, overnight, our entire digital workplace just evaporated. Your teams are suddenly scrambling to communicate or process the most basic transactions. That is the harsh reality of instant digital banishment. And make no mistake, this risk extends all the way up to the highest levels of national security. The Future of Technology Institute's Cloud Defense Report highlighted a situation in 2022 where US-based Maxar Technologies restricted Ukraine's access to key satellite imagery, right in tandem with diplomatic pressure. Ukrainian officers went on record saying this shutoff severely hampered their air defenses and tactical operations. Think about that for a second. If critical national defense operations in an active conflict zone are vulnerable to this kind of unilateral kill switch from a vendor, our corporate infrastructure is absolutely exposed. Now, what's really interesting about this next slide, Section 2, extraterritorial laws and sanctions, is the structural why behind all of this. It largely comes down to legislation like the Cloud Act. Passed in 2018, this law allows U.S. federal law enforcement to legally compel U.S.-based tech companies to hand over requested data. And here is the absolutely crucial part. It does not matter if that data is stored on foreign soil. You could have servers in Frankfurt, Paris, Mumbai. It literally doesn't matter. If the provider is a U.S. company or even a subsidiary of one, they have to comply. This legislation entirely bypasses local jurisdictions and puts our data squarely under foreign legal mandates. We also have to understand the specific legal levers being pulled here, namely U.S. sanctions administered by OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, and FISA Section 702. Those OFAC sanctions, that is exactly what created the kill switch for the ICC and Nayara Energy. U.S. companies are legally barred from providing services to sanctioned entities. They literally have no choice. They have to pull the plug. Meanwhile, FISA Section 702 allows intelligence agencies to acquire foreign communications. The takeaway here is that for U.S. vendors, cutting off access or handing over data is not vendor malice. It is a matter of strict, unavoidable legal compliance with their home country's laws. For those of us operating in Europe, this presents a pretty sobering reality. Despite how robust the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, is, these extraterritorial laws just completely bypass local privacy shields. I mean, GDPR explicitly says that foreign administrative requests shouldn't be recognized without an international agreement, something like a mutual legal assistance treaty. But the Cloud Act just sidesteps those treaties altogether. It creates a massive direct legal conflict. Because we depend so heavily on non-European providers, our data is caught right in the middle of this legal crossfire. Moving into Section 3, assessing our cloud dependency. This directly answers the implicit "so what" about the sheer scale of the threat. So what is right here in the numbers. Roughly 80 to 90% of all European Union cloud and software spending flows directly to non-EU providers. That is a truly staggering concentration of operational reliance. It means the vast majority of our entire digital ecosystem is fundamentally subject to the exact extraterritorial risks we were just talking about. And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep the dependency goes. Look at the exposure level of European national defense agencies to U.S. cloud providers. Out of 28 agencies studied, 16 are rated as high risk. What's really fascinating and frankly a bit alarming is that even when defense ministries use local European contractors, those contractors themselves are almost always highly dependent on U.S. tech infrastructure. If national defense systems are this dangerously exposed via local contractors dependent on hyperscalers, it's practically guaranteed that our corporate supply chains have the exact same systemic vulnerability. Section 4. The data localization myth. Let's clear up a massive misconception I hear all the time from executives. You see, there is a massive, critical difference between data localization and true sovereign cloud. Data localization just means your data is physically sitting on local servers, say a data center right here in Europe. But if that data center is owned by a foreign company, it absolutely still falls under foreign legal jurisdiction. People bring up technical workarounds like confidential compute or air gapping, and those are great for security, for sure, but they do not stop the extraterritorial reach of a law like the Cloud Act. A true sovereign cloud means the infrastructure, the ownership, and the legal accountability are 100% immune to foreign orders. This dynamic has created a phenomenon experts are calling sovereignty washing. You'll see major incumbent hyperscalers aggressively marketing local EU regions or onshore support teams as these fully sovereign solutions to kind of calm the market down. But remember, those measures cannot neutralize foreign jurisdiction under the Cloud Act or sanctions law. True sovereignty isn't just some neat technical architecture. It requires the provider to actually be legally immune from foreign orders. If they aren't, that kill switch is still very much active. Which brings us to our final part. Section 5. Strategic mitigation and exit. What do we actually do about this? Let's move to and see how this builds into real-world action. Because shifting away from monopoly clouds is not just some pipe dream, it is already happening successfully all across Europe. Italy and Austria have fully migrated tens of thousands of defense workstations to open-source tools like LibreOffice. Germany is rolling out European alternatives like OpenDesk. We are seeing entire industries actively invest in federated infrastructure like the Gaia X ecosystem and deploying smart hybrid architectures to completely insulate their most critical systems. It is highly doable. To build a robust cloud exit strategy for ourselves, which, by the way, is rapidly becoming a strict regulatory requirement thanks to entities like the European Banking Authority, we need to follow these exact steps. First, we have got to move away from purely manual lock-in assessments. They are way too slow and prone to error. Second, we must leverage automated cloud exit assessment tools so we are continuously mapping our dependencies. Third, we need to adopt hybrid models that prioritize open standards, which stops future vendor lock-in in its tracks. And finally, we absolutely must bring in cloud exit experts to ensure true cross-cloud portability. The bottom line is we have to have a plan to get out before we are forced out. So I will leave you with this final, frankly provocative thought. If a foreign government order forced our primary cloud provider to pull the plug today, right now, how long would our business actually survive? Cloud infrastructure is clearly no longer just an IT concern for the tech team. It is a major existential geopolitical risk, and it absolutely requires our immediate strategic action at this board level to ensure our autonomy and our survival moving forward. Thank you all for your time.